Malcolm is truly a unique series when we compare it to other family comedies that have been made for television. Well, despite everything, we are completely sure that everything we see is clearly grounded in reality. Well, that's what I thought until TV Nada explained to me the main theory of this video. I mean, I'm aware that Malcolm has some decidedly weird stuff. There's the mattress episode, that time Dewey's hamster that survived traveled around the state in that plastic ball, and we can't forget about the cow Diablo that Francis has to face in one episode, a monster that has killed other animals in incredibly violent ways. There are also a bunch of other weird theories. But one of the elements whose explanation might be even stranger than you think is that egg boy who appeared in just one episode and was never mentioned again. Egg, which means huevo in Spanish, makes his only appearance in the episode The Funeral from the first season, where in his initial scene he just appears eating cereal sitting at the kitchen table with absolutely no one knowing who he is or how he got there. It's not until Dewey arrives that Egg is revealed to be a friend of his, but he also doesn't know his name or how he got into the house. In fact, interestingly, his real name is never actually revealed, since the whole family just calls him Egg because they think that's what he said. Now, something important is that even though Lois repeatedly asks to please take him home, Egg always seems to come back, to the point that Dewey himself mentions that he keeps coming back. And in fact, his characteristic total silence isn't his only strange behavior. He consumes large amounts of sugar, decides to throw the kitchen utensils, and maintains a submissive and compliant attitude where he seems to blindly obey everything the family tells him. And that's all. From this point on, Egg is never mentioned again, let alone appears again. But with that single curious appearance, it's clear that he left a mark on the people who watched the episode. Obviously, the wild speculation from fans didn't take long, so the true origin of this strange boy is one of the show's mysteries with the most interesting theories. They range from the most logical to the saddest, strange, and supernatural. The first theory is perhaps the simplest. In episode 19 of the 5th season, we discovered that the school, in addition to the area for gifted students, also has one for children with special needs, which is relatively close and accessible. The big difference is that these kids, unlike the gifted class that has great teachers, activities, and above all strong financial support, are seen by the teachers as less than other students. For example, they are taught incredibly simple topics, like farm animals. In fact, in the worst cases, they are even exploited as cheap labor. And that may be exactly why the kids don't seem to have complained, because several of them are nonverbal, like our friend Egg. Observing other kids in class, we later get to know it seems common for them to be obsessed with one thing. We have David Hansen, a boy who's so into motorcycles that he pretends to be on one all the time. There's Zoe, who's obsessed with animals and thinks she can talk to them. And we can't forget Chad, the boy who's obsessed with biting. So we can't completely rule out the idea that Egg is actually obsessed with that food. And one theory is that he just wasn't going to stop eating until he got some scrambled eggs. Something that connects very well with his tantrum during the episode, being a nonverbal child with special needs who gets frustrated because he isn't given his favorite food. But if we decide to follow this storyline, we'll come across a possibility that's a bit sadder. Multiple sources confirm that those behaviors we just mentioned could mean that a child has been in an environment where it isn't safe to express themselves. Whether it's because of scolding, bullying, mistreatment, punishments, or other reasons, it can happen that a child decides to stop expressing themselves completely as a defense mechanism. And if Dewey is almost 7 years old in this episode, then the boy should be around 5, so at the very least, his complete muteness makes him unusual. It could be that Egg kept coming back with Dewey because he didn't feel comfortable at home, and the Wilkersons, despite all their flaws as a family, made him feel safer than in his own home. Moving on to less dark topics for a moment, while I was looking for information to support my theory, I came across this post from the page Senior Waffle that mentions another possibility. It could be an inside joke from the production team, since the actor who plays Dewey has Swedish ancestry, and Dewey would say "hedge," I think that's how you say it, to greet his fellow cast members. Well, even though we were able to confirm that it's not just his family, but that he actually speaks a bit of Swedish in real life, it's not a very popular theory, and we couldn't find anyone else who could confirm it elsewhere. But if we seriously consider this explanation, Egg would end up being a Swedish kid who's friends with Dewey. He quietly tried to greet in Swedish when surrounded by strangers, but after realizing no one understood, he stayed silent for the rest of the episode. episode, which explains his weird name, his behavior, and everything else. This could even explain the scenes where Lois and Hal talk to him directly. You see, when she asks him for the scrubber, she tells him to pass the loofah, a word that's even said and written similarly in Swedish, and the boy obeys without any problem. But when Hal gives him a complex instruction in English, asking everyone to get in the car, the boy doesn't understand until they say egg, and then he finally realizes he has to follow them. If this didn't seem like enough evidence for this theory, it actually explains the previous theory's gaps well. I mean, he probably won't appear again in the series or with the special needs kids precisely because he went back to Sweden, making a reunion completely impossible. Curiously, this would also explain why Dewey is unable to get rid of him or even know his name, since Egg doesn't understand the questions, and when Dewey decides to take him back to where he found him, he just follows him back home. And as a bonus point, if we take into account that the series is filmed in California, we'll see that in real life it's a state with a huge Swedish community, being home to more than 300,000 Swedish immigrants, and it even has a city built entirely by them. So, if we assume that Malcolm in the Middle takes place there, meeting someone of that nationality is not impossible at all, although that's a topic for another video. But even though these are the most logical theories that could explain a minor character, this video couldn't end without telling you about one of the wildest, most beloved, and popular theories surrounding the boy. Egg is dead, and Malcolm's house is haunted by his ghost. Okay, I know this might sound like something out of nowhere, but the show has played around with several supernatural elements, like aliens, cryptids, or killers. Sure, many of these are subplots involving Francis, but it shows that, in a way, there are some unexplained occurrences in this world. One of the most important revelations about the family happens in Season 7, Episode 4, Halloween. In this episode, the boys discovered that the place where they lived was the scene of a horrible, violent crime. In the words of the show itself, the place where one of the most horrible mass murders in the state's history took place. Now, the episode in many ways debates whether this is real or not, but considering that the family has lived for decades on a property where they forgot about that second bathroom, I totally believe that they could have overlooked that little detail. Coincidentally, we were already investigating. I was researching the house to make a video talking about the serial killer on the loose in Malcolm in the Middle, so I'll spoil a little bit of that video to remind you that this home had a secret tunnel in the boys' room that seemed to exist as an escape route. It had strange holes in the middle of the yard and, on top of that, an underground bar that, again, no one remembers or mentions after a while. They seem to be escape routes, places to hide evidence, and other elements that show that any criminal who had been there was truly terrifying. Which means that a child could have easily ended up among the victims and, well, become part of one of those horrible crimes. Other things that support this theory are the ghostly rules that seem to permeate this brief appearance. Egg appears out of nowhere in the middle of the kitchen eating cereal that no one served him. Probably part of a routine that the Spectre had for decades, but that today became visible thanks to the negative energies in the room. And yes, I already sound like your friend who believes in horoscopes, and that Saturn retrograde is the reason she's still unemployed, but this episode takes place at a funeral after a pretty graphic and painful death, where yes, the cats ate her. The sociologist Christopher Bader has mentioned that those who believe in ghosts are more likely to encounter them, which, aside from having some very funny implications, gives us something to think about regarding Egg. It turns out that in the Halloween episode, it's revealed that the whole family is superstitious, including Hal, who has a long conversation about the topic, convincing Malcolm of Malik. The same goes for Lois, who, although she appears skeptical, seems to have a certain sensitivity toward the supernatural. So, in this theory, everything is resolved with the car trip, because, incidentally, the family is taking the ghost to a funeral, an accidental act that finally allows him to understand that he is dead and lets Egg's soul rest. Though it's the most popular theory, I'm less convinced by it than by the one suggesting he's a special needs child who escaped from school. But something that the ghost theory has, which no other theory does, is that it connects to the killer mystery, the mystery of the killer, a truly terrifying mystery that we'll talk about in an upcoming video, because from what little we've been able to see in our investigations, it seems that what happened in the Wilkersons' house is enough to have a docuseries on Netflix. Hope you enjoyed this theoretical and supernatural video, like if you did, and subscribe for more. Remember, not all autistic people are Swedish, and not all Swedes are autistic. Don't let the psyops that bombard your TikTok algorithm fool you. See you in the next video. Goodbye.